There are two candidates named. All right. Welcome to the Voter Education Coalition and KLWN 2017 General Election School Board Candidate Forum. The Voter Education Coalition is a nonpartisan organization that sponsors candidate forums, meet and greets, and other events to educate citizens about candidates and their policies. You can learn more about VEC events by visiting their webpage at www.votereducationcoalition.org. This forum will be available on the City of Lawrence YouTube channel, Midco Channel 25, and on the Voter Education Coalition's Facebook and website. New FM 1017 and 1320 KLWN will be airing a replay of this forum several times over the next few weeks. It will also be available at klwn.com. We'd like to thank the City of Lawrence and their staff for use of the City Commission meeting room and all their help in making this event possible. The rules for this forum are simple. I'll be asking questions submitted by the VEC partners and audience members. Each question will have a designated 60-second response time. At the end of this period, you'll hear a bell and we'll move to the next candidate or question. Our timekeeper will take care of ringing that bell loudly and clearly. We'll rotate the order of responses between each candidate. There will be no rebuttals and no questions from the candidates. Prior to each response, we will acknowledge each candidate by name so that listeners know whose voice they are hearing. Now, we have two people that will be on the ballot that you'll see when you go to vote, whether it's in the courthouse now or whether it's at your polling place. And they are not running. They've taken their names out of contention. And it's I'm going to name the two candidates because their names may be on the ballot, but they are not candidates at this time. So please use your ballot to vote for candidates that are running. The two names that are not running are Steve Wallace and Jill Hayhurst. Now, there's one candidate today that unfortunately cannot be here. She's in duty as mom in Kansas City today, taking care of a son who's at the hospital recovering from surgery. And she did write a comment to us that it was approved by the VEC for me to read to you. And this comes from Melissa Johnson. She said, "First, I want to thank the Voter Education Coalition and the moderator for allowing me the opportunity to be represented in some form today. I'm currently in Kansas City with a child who's recovering from a surgery. Thank you in advance for your understanding. I decided to run for school board because I want to make a difference in the lives of as many children as possible. I am the parent of children in the Lawrence Public Schools and an educator. I am able to run for school board as an educator because I teach in another district. I've witnessed the strengths that the district has to offer, as well as the areas that can be improved. I've sat in numerous board meetings this past year and on occasion spoken and offered ideas. After a while, a seat became vacant and I applied. I was overwhelmed with joy to have been chosen by both the current board members and the community to fill the vacant seat. I will continue to do my best and utilize my personal and professional skills to assist the district as they work further on equity, engagement, and excellence. This means getting out of our comfort zones and addressing uncomfortable issues such as racial disparities and inequalities among the marginalized group. Being recently appointed has awarded me the opportunity to begin addressing some of these issues directly. And again, I am reading the comments of Melissa Johnson, who's unable to be here for this forum today because she's with her son recovering from surgery in Kansas City. The district has established committees to address the needs of multiple marginalized groups. These committees are made up of district staff, parents, students, and community members. I believe that these committees can come together periodically and address topics that intersect. Furthermore, we need to communicate and educate the rest of the community as well. We can accomplish this by using social media and newsletters to get more information out to students and staff within the district and to parents and community members. We can also offer opportunities to have dialogue around challenging issues both within the district and with the community. Although my platform focuses primarily on equity issues, I can assure you that I am not a single-issue candidate, and I will work with the district and stakeholders to ensure that we first and foremost hire a superintendent who is a good fit for our community and will uphold the board's goals and policies in an effective manner. Once again, I want to say that I'm honored to have been chosen to fill the vacant seat on the board back in March. 74.5% of the community who respond to the board's call for input believe that I was a good fit for this position. It is my hope that you will allow me to continue on this journey by supporting me at the polls on November 7th. Once again, these are the comments of Melissa Johnson, unable to be here today because of her responsibilities as mom today do come first, as I think we all understand they should. Now we'll move on to our questions, and we do have a number of questions that have been prepared by the Voter Education Coalition, and I will begin with those. And then we've had a number of questions that have been submitted prior to this afternoon's session, and we'll move to those. We'll also take questions as they fit in from people who are in the audience here today. But I will begin, and we'll go in alphabetical order and then move to the next person on the next question to begin the process again. With just 4 people up there, I hope I can keep track of it and be on the right mark and the right person when the time comes to ask the second, third, and fourth questions and on down the line. Our first question will begin with G.R. Gordon Ross. What is the process for the investigation of claims of discrimination and inequity, and what stakeholders are involved in that process? I'll be glad to repeat any question as I go through them today.
I think the process would be to start with the administrator at the building. The student would make the claim, the administrator would speak to the parent, and certainly involve the parent, and then speak to the whoever was involved, be it a teacher, be it a coach, be it a staff member, that certainly need to involve the parent, the administrator, and things like that. And then if it needs to go higher up the chain, if a family or a parent isn't satisfied with how it's going, it can go there. But certainly where possible, it should stay at the building level, involve the parents, and work within the building and the principal and the staff there.
All right, to our next candidate, and that's Alan Hollinger.
Can you repeat the question, please?
The question, what is the process for the investigation of claims of discrimination and inequity, and what stakeholders are involved in that process?
I do not know the current policies at this time. I haven't read those yet. But I believe everybody that is involved in the claim would be the student, the parents, administrators, teacher, if that's where it came from, another student, if that's where the claim came from. Work it out at a building level. If the students and the parents don't feel that they've got a reasonable or a good outcome to that, then they need to move to the district level. If they don't find that they get the results they want at the district level, they are more than welcome to come to the board, in my opinion, and get results there.
All right, and I haven't had to hear the bell ring yet, but we do have 60 seconds to answer the question, and I should remind you of that. Our next candidate to answer that is Kelly Jones.
Yeah, so the specific policy as it's written at the district level is not one that I have had opportunity to read, but I am aware that when there is a discrimination claim made, that you do start certainly with the administrator, but the board would be involved in that conversation, as there are legal implications for the district. And certainly I think addressing any issue as it relates to discrimination would be in line with our equity goals. And so for me, it would be important as a board member that those are claims that I am aware of, and know how the district is managing them and how they are addressing those claims, so that when we have issues arise, both staff are protected in terms of their due process rights, but also that the right of the individual who is experiencing this discrimination is not in any way compromised.
And our next candidate to answer is Gretchen Lister.
Those are all good answers. I too am not yet familiar with the policy, but from experience, not my own personally, but this is just my belief, is that if there is ever a concern, it's best to go to the individual you have the concern with first. I would tell whoever the individual feels that they have been treated disrespectfully, that they need to document. If it's a student, sit down with your parents and discuss it with them. Let's not try to be overreactive. I think sometimes there's a lot of reactivity. Let's figure out what was going on, and let's get together with that teacher or principal or student or whomever that comment came from, where they're feeling that sense of disparity or disrespect. And if we don't get the results we need there, then we go and speak to the building principal or administrator. But we have to keep everybody involved in the discussion. And hopefully by sitting down and discussing any misunderstandings and trying to resolve what those are and how we can better meet one another's concerns, that I believe is the best way to do it. If not, then we go higher up the chain to address it. But first and foremost, always talking to the individual that you have the problem or the concern with is my belief.
Thank you very much. Our next question will begin with candidate Alan Hollinger. Would you support the establishment of charter schools in our district?
I have not done any research on that to have a definite yes or a definite no. I would lean towards no, but I haven't done any research on that.
All right, and with that, we'll move on to our next person on the list then, and that takes care of that. We'll go to Kelly Jones.
I don't support currently I would not support the inclusion of charter schools in this district. Primarily, it would be concerning for me that we may be drawing resources away from the district that we vitally need right now, given the low rate at which schools have been funded. So there would not be an argument for me that I would feel comfortable right now approving a charter school within the district.
Thank you very much. And our final, next question, that question being answered now by Gretchen Lister.
Hi, yeah, I have to tell you, I'm open to any and everything. Anything that's going to improve equity in this district for our kids and the achievement gap that's going on. We have a huge divide there that we need to address. I want to bring the alternative high school back. I want to bring our video schooling that we're doing right now into our high schools for our kids and our middle schools and our elementary schools. Whatever it's going to take to engage our kids, get them on board, get them learning, build their confidence. Wherever we need to shift those dollars to make sure we're getting the biggest bang for our buck. But ultimately, we're going to need to hear from parents, we're going to need to hear from students, and as a community. But I'm not opposed to anything that can bring about positive results for our young people. Thank you.
And G.R. Gordon Ross will be the last candidate to address this one.
I would say at this point, for a lot of the same reasons that Kelly said in terms of dividing resources, I would say that no, I would not support charter resources. I think that we have a lot of work that we can do within the district right now to improve those achievement gaps and to keep the resources in the same bucket and to address some of the issues. I'm a big proponent of public schools. I'm a product of public schools, and I believe in what public schools can do for our community and the strength that they bring. And so for those reasons, I would have to say no.
All right, and on to the third question, and our first person to answer this one will be Kelly Jones. Sometimes policy and the reality at the school level are not congruent. How would you maintain a well-rounded understanding of what is happening in our schools, as well as make yourself available for public input?
So I am the Associate Director of Field Education at the KU School of Social Welfare. My degree and background is in policy work. I have spent 20 plus years looking at whether policy is in line with what an agency is trying to achieve in terms of outcomes. So for me, this particular question is one where I feel like I have strengths. What I have found to be successful in my work is that when I am having conversations with the people that are on the ground impacted by the policies, that's when I understand best where the need might be. For me, in this particular issue, and certainly as I've been out in the community campaigning and talking to dozens of teachers, what I hear is from teachers what's practically happening on the ground. And for me, when I'm making decisions related to policy, I will be evaluating, is this in the best interest of the student? Is it in the best interest of the teacher? Is it in the best interest of the district? And are there unintended consequences to this particular policy that we haven't yet made available? So in terms of being available, I will certainly be present, as been the tradition of Lawrence school board members in many different capacities in the community.
And then Gretchen Lister.
Yes, of course I would be available. I think in order to bring about the appropriate change that our district is needing, we're going to have to look at some procedures and policies. I think it'll be absolutely imperative that we continue the discussion with this community. I've been very impressed with the questionnaires that have gone out, with the articles the Journal World has done, with my own personal campaigning, going door to door and talking to people. We've invested hugely in this community with the dollars for the renovation work and the new building sites. And I want to make sure that that same kind of investment is going into the buildings, just not on the outside of them. So anything in regard to policy procedure, absolutely I'll be on board with, and want to get as much community input and include them as much as possible.
All right, and back to the first candidate on the panel today, G.R. Gordon Ross.
Could you repeat the question for me, please? Thank you.
Yes, sometimes policy and the reality at the school level are not congruent. How would you maintain a well-rounded understanding of what is happening in our schools, as well as make yourself available for public input?
I think the best way to understand what's going on, and it's the same way to be available, is just to be present, to visit schools where possible, to visit activities. You know, I have kids at Prairie Park, I have kids at South, I have kids at Lawrence High School, and so I'm in those schools. But as a school board member, to go beyond that, to go and visit activities at other schools, and while you're there, to make yourself known as a school board member if people don't know, and have conversations, to have, you know, to use a Facebook page or a social media platform to have conversations, to set up public forums that are on a schedule, repeatable public conversations, I think are a way to know what's going on, and to receive input would be what my plan would be going forward.
All right, and Alan Hollinger will be the last to answer that.
As with my current position at Douglas County, I'm available to the people of Douglas County 24/7. They have my email, my cell phone. As with any student, parent, staff member, a school board member should be available at any time they have a question or need or a concern. As for getting on the ground, I would not only visit the schools for the board luncheons, but make surprise visits, just show up, talk to the students, staff, anybody, just to see what's going on. If you hear of a concern from a parent, just show up, find out what's going on, see how the school's being run, and just things like that.
All right, our next question, and we'll start this one with Gretchen Lister. When USD 497 facilities construction projects in Lawrence, what relationship should the school district have with the city regarding permitting and inspections?
Gosh, we just hired Kyle Hayden to kind of overlook that for a big chunk of change, so I'm assuming he's going to be on top of that. I don't really have a background in that, so I will defer, hopefully, to whoever is doing construction that it is being overseen properly and that there is communication with city folks about permits and any regulations that are needed to ensure safety and that things are being done accordingly. But since, as I said, we've already awarded someone a pretty significant salary to oversee that, I'm going to assume that's in good hands, and that's something the superintendent and board will follow very, very closely.
Let me read that question once more. When USD 497 facilitates construction projects in Lawrence, what relationship should the school district have with the city regarding permitting and inspections? G.R. Gordon Ross.
I think the city should be treated, the district should be treated just like any other business or any other entity. We have an obligation to the city to fulfill the same requirements for inspections, to pay for the same permits, just as any other entity. I don't think that the city owes the district any special waivers or any special favors. I mean, we have seen instances in the past where that has happened, and so I think part of that process would be to, those construction projects going forward should account for the fact that we, as a district, should pay for the permits and pay for the inspections just as if we were any other entity or any other business in town.
And Alan Hollinger.
I realize the city gives private contractors deals, tax abatements, things like that, but I think in a government setting, as with the school district, they should pay the fees up front. Be open, clear, no mud in the waters. They pay their fees, get their permits, they do the inspections. If for some reason with the last issue there was, we don't know who's doing the inspecting, then the school board, school district needs to step up and say, hey, this wasn't done, can you get an inspector out here and follow all the protocols to the letter?
All right. Finally, Kelly Jones.
Yes, so I concur with the other candidates in terms of the school board's responsibility to pay for those permits, and it's a way of acknowledging the work that the city does in terms of making sure that when we are involved in construction, that we're doing it in a way that is safe and will have the best outcomes for the buildings and for the students that are inside of them. I will say that I have noted lately that there is a movement on the part of both the City Commission and the school board members to establish a strong relationship where we can have these challenging conversations when they arise. And I am pleased to see that direction, and if I am elected to the school board, we'll certainly be engaged with city commissioners in the way that we've seen some of the joint meetings that have been occurring along with the county commissioners as well.
All right, and our next question, and this goes back to the start of the group. This is G.R. Gordon Ross' question. What restorative justice practices would you like to see implemented in our school district? And the pronunciation restorative justice practices, and I'll try it that way as well. How's that?
I'm going to have to freely admit that your repronunciation still doesn't help me understand what it means.
Well, I would have pronounced it restorative, and restorative might be better or maybe easier to understand the word, but the old pronunciation was restorative. Restorative, perhaps, restorative justice practices.
Restorative
It's
justice.
a term I haven't run into either, so we'll both just look at each other and say, what practices would you like to see implemented in our school district? I'm
going to venture to say that Kelly's probably going to have a really good answer, and I'm going to really like Kelly's answer. I realize that's probably the best I'm going to come up with because I don't know, and you had to give me this one first.
I should have asked Kelly to
You probably should have asked Kelly to go
pronounce
first.
the word
but,
for me, and that would have helped out.
So I'm freely going to admit, because I learned a long time ago, it's better to admit when you don't know something. I really don't know what that means. So Kelly's going to explain it to me, and then I'm going to like Kelly's answer. So we're going to go with that.
Alan Hollinger, would you like
Good luck.
to?
Yeah, I don't have a good answer for that one either. I'm not familiar. Restorative?
I'm so excited to talk about this, so when it's my turn, I'll take their minutes. But
All right, we should have started with you just
Yes.
automatically. Restorative?
yes, so the way that I've worked on projects where we've utilized restorative justice within the practice of social welfare. It's a common concept. And essentially what we're looking at in terms of as it relates to the school district is moving away from a punitive disciplinary action into an opportunity for students that have done something that's inappropriate to have opportunity to do good work and to contribute back to society. So the example that I would give is in my early career, I worked for an organization called Operation Fresh Start. We did restorative justice work with kids that had interacted with the criminal justice system and gave them opportunity to build homes in low-income neighborhoods that were then made available in a practice that looked something like tenants to homeowners. So when you allow a person the opportunity to do restorative justice work, you are in fact allowing them the opportunity to participate in an intervention. It allows students the ability to improve behaviors that they may have had that are negatively impacting other students. This is the opportunity for them to do good work. So Central Middle School is participating in a restorative justice pilot program. I'm excited to see the outcomes, to see how that worked, how it worked for the teachers, and I look forward to the opportunity to implement it in other schools as well.
Thank you very much. And again, Alan, would you like to have any thought on that, or GR? I think it would only be fair, since I mispronounced it when I first said the question, and then did get it right, the restorative. Restorative is a little bit too...
No, I think, once Kelly explained it, which I knew she would, no, I think it makes sense. I think having that system where a student has an opportunity to not just be punished, but have an opportunity to give back and to, because putting a student in that position where they have an opportunity to do something good and to see the results of doing something good and putting a framework in place where they can be a positive influence and see the results of that influence and that work can have a much more lasting impact than just putting them in school suspension and then putting them back into the same situation again. So I certainly would be supportive of that, and will also be interested to see the results of what happens at Central.
Alan, would you like a shot at that one?
Yeah, I can't really make it any clearer or better than these two have. I would be all on board for that type of system and see the results of it, yes.
And then Gretchen, you probably knew it as well, so Gretchen Lister.
I think they could have put it a lot more plainly when they asked that question. You know, when kids make mistakes, do they get a chance? You know, do they get another chance? And I think we should always get another chance. I think especially our young people, we know, those of us in education, and really everyone probably in this room, that we often see the negative behaviors from individuals when they are feeling a sense of hopelessness or a sense of lack of direction, and they're looking for it. And sometimes they show it in ways that are very destructive. And so I think any way we can keep reinvesting in our young people. You know, as teachers, we make mistakes too. We have to be willing to look there when mistakes are made and own it and say they have an opportunity to rebuild on that mistake and talk about it and start again. So I'm anxious to see what comes out of Central. Certainly those situations are happening in all our schools, not just Central, but let's see what the outcomes are, where that information goes, and then how we can utilize it, because we have these kinds of concerns all the time, and we can do a much better job to resolve the issues that are out there. Thank you.
Thank you. And then we'll go to Alan for the first answer on our next question, and we move now from Voter Education Coalition questions to questions that were presented by people either online or to members of the VEC to add into the questions today. The first of those is, do you support the delivery of inclusive, comprehensive sexuality education in our schools, including providing continued open access to free condoms in our high schools in partnership with the Lawrence Douglas County Health Department? Alan Hollinger.
Reread the first part of that question.
Do you support the delivery of inclusive, comprehensive sexuality education in our schools, including providing continued open access to free condoms in our high schools in partnership with the health department?
Well, I don't know enough about the sexual education program in the school. I have not researched into that. So until I do some more research, I don't know. I don't want to give an answer on that one.
Okay. And then to Kelly Jo.
So 14 years ago, when I started doing advocacy work related to public policy and education in Kansas, the program that I was working with really was a state level comprehensive sex education advocacy. So this is absolutely something I would support as a board member, and do support making condoms available to high school students in Lawrence. What we know about the data when we protect comprehensive sex education as opposed to abstinence-only sex education, that the rates of sexually transmitted diseases along with unintended pregnancies actually go down. So the data is there, so it's not just something that feels right for a very progressive community, but in fact it's something that's supported by studies and actually by almost anyone looking at the information. They would understand that this is really an area where we should focus. And Lawrence has been a leader in this area. We do not have a opt-out policy in Lawrence, so you in fact do not need to opt into comprehensive sex education. And I'm very proud of the work that Lawrence has done around sex education.
And moving on now to Gretchen Lister.
Yes, here, I would say completely. I personally do support that. But I still think it's a discussion that every household needs to have with their children, and that parents do, regardless of whether they're on board or not. I think we need to be able to talk to our kids. I was the clinical director of the Topeka AIDS Project for a number of years. We know there are sexually transmitted diseases out there. I would far rather my children play it safe than to come home with a sexually transmitted disease. Kids are going to experiment, they're going to explore, but let's give them the knowledge base and the education they need to be safe, to be smart.
And then to G.R. Gordon Ross.
I would echo what Kelly and Gretchen said and kind of expand upon that a little bit. So to directly answer the question, yes, I would support it. And I would also support a means by which the district can help and provide the same education and tools to parents who may not be comfortable having that conversation with their kids, and provide a means by which parents can come and learn how to have that conversation. Because I'm a strong believer that the best place to have that conversation is at home, that's where it should take place. But to provide a means to have that conversation at schools to support, because the data does support having that system in place leads to better outcomes. Not to lump it all under better outcomes, but I'm a data guy, that's what I do. But I think that it can be done, so I do support that.
All right, and moving on down through the line of our questions now to Kelly for the first answer, Kelly Jones. The Kansans Can initiative, currently being piloted by KSDE in 7 districts and going statewide during your possible terms of office, looks to transform the educational systems of our state. The initiative groups students together by competencies rather than age. What is your vision for implementing Kansans Can in the Lawrence Public Schools?
So the particular particular initiative that you're referring to has a life expectancy of the next 10 years. So they'll be looking at what does this particular program do, and how does it impact educational outcomes, and is it appropriate for students? Can we expect to see better outcomes if we revolutionize how we deliver education in Kansas? I'm actually very excited about this initiative. I'm looking forward to see what the outcomes are, but we are quite early to say that we are at a place now where we would eliminate grade levels in Lawrence, particularly as we look at what's appropriate for children in terms of development, and we'll be learning as this initiative goes forward whether or not it's appropriate for Lawrence and whether or not it could provide us an opportunity for students to do better. I'll certainly be following it. I'm glad that we have the opportunity to do it in Kansas and that it's supported. And I hope that other progressive initiatives where we have opportunity to look at different ways of delivering curriculum are available to Kansans.
Our next candidate is Gretchen Lister.
Again, I would agree with Kelly. Anything that's going to open up the door for opportunity to look at how we're teaching and how we can do it better. I'm not opposed to trying anything. It may be a few years out. you know, I'm a big believer that if kids are ready to graduate at 16, they should have a diploma. If they want to spend 2 more years after that, I think we should provide them a skill, a trade, something they can leave with and really utilize. So I'm an open book when it comes to this. I think we have to be willing to try new things, to look at it, to hear what parents say, hear what teachers have to say. We're still trying to get used to technology in our classrooms and make sure we're utilizing that properly. So I'm open to anything that wants to come in and research and look and open it up. And anything that's going to put Kansas first and Kansas kids first, I'm all for. Thank you.
G.R. Gordon Ross.
I'm really interested to see how the pilot goes. I think the concept is really exciting, and it's really interesting to see how it works out to take education on a broad scale and individualize it to students and their needs and their progression directly to the question of how we would implement it in Lawrence. I think the very simple answer is will depend on how the pilot goes and what the pilot teaches us about what works and what doesn't, and where things shake out. You know, it's, you know, the biggest question comes from how do we keep kids from falling through the cracks? Mm-hmm. You know, and I'm sure the pilot will address that, but I'm excited to see how it works, and certainly would be in support of implementing it in the Lawrence School District if I happen to still be around 10 years from now when that happens.
All right, and next person then would be Alan Hollinger.
Again, I'd like to see the data too, as it comes out, how things are going. But if anything helps the students graduate, stay in school, and stay involved, I'd be willing to research that some more and implement it if it helps that graduation rate, the educational value for the students, and it helps them improve and leave school to become successful adults.
All right, and we move on now to our next question. And this will begin with the question for Gretchen Lister. Over the past several years, in what ways has the level of state funding for public education directly impacted students in our district?
Well, we all pretty much know the answer to that, and it's been very poor. We can do a far better job. It's really not been at our control. Obviously, it's been run by state government. You know, granted, Governor Brownback's on his way out, but we still have another 2 years. We've got lawsuits pending. We've got money rolling into that. I think we can't be discouraged by what we're seeing and hearing. I think we still have to work with what we have, realize that we have the best teachers in Lawrence School District, realize that we are investing as taxpayers to make sure that our schools are running smoothly, that the resources are there that our kids need, and that when the state catches up to what we need, and we'll keep plugging ahead and making sure, you know, we're improving those achievement gaps, but there's very little we can do to really control currently what's going on in Topeka. The powers that be have pretty much made that determination, and we'll just keep moving forward and hopefully letting our votes show them what we think needs to come in the future. Thank you.
And the next candidate on that question is G.R. Gordon Ross.
I think the biggest, the direct impact of state funding has been staffing. You know, class sizes due to a lack of teachers. You look at specialty teachers, art, music, and PE. We have a lot of elementary schools that don't have their own and they have to share. And so you have PE teachers that have to travel across town, sometimes over their own lunch hour, because they can't, because the district doesn't have the funding to have those teachers at their own buildings. Special ed teachers, counselors, those types of staff members, wages for paraeducators, those probably have been the most direct impact in terms of funding to the district and how it's directly impacted the students.
And Mr. Hollinger.
Yes, I feel that the state needs to increase the spending per pupil. It relates back to teacher shortages, wages for paraeducators, but also curriculum, not enough materials for some of the students. So we do need to increase the funding so we can increase the quality of education for the students.
And Ms. Jones.
So what the Kansas Supreme Court determined was that we were not providing adequate and equitable funding for Kansas students. In particular, students from marginalized populations were impacted, so low-income students, African-American students, Hispanic students were disproportionately impacted by the lack of funding that came through from the state. Definitely, I concur that we saw teacher salaries stagnate. We were operating within a deficit spending mode, which meant that we were not able to bring salaries up to comparable levels with districts that have higher, are wealthier districts, so it made it more competitive in terms of retaining teachers. In Lawrence, it was hard, and I think we've seen the consequences of that in terms of teacher loss to other districts, neighboring districts. So certainly, I think the funding has had really serious consequences for public education in Lawrence, and I'm hopeful that now that we are in a trajectory where we're looking at increasing funding, we will have an increase in per pupil spending.
All right, and now our next question, and we'll start back at the beginning again with GR. Gordon Ross. Nationally, cafeteria equity has gotten a lot of media attention. Do you believe the district has a sufficient policy on this issue?
Cafeteria equity.
I read the words here.
You read the words on the page.
Nationally, cafeteria equity has gotten a lot of media attention.
Since I already used my defer to Kelly card, I'm probably going to have to take a shot at this one. You know, I'm sure I probably know what that phrase is, formed with different words in a different order, but you know, having had various personal experiences within the district, within food service, you know, I think we do a pretty good job. We free and reduced lunch, breakfast. You know, the district does a good job of trying to provide equitable food, healthy food, and to reach out. Food pantries at the elementary school level specifically, they try to reach as many students with as much food who need them, especially the food pantries, to take them home to families that need them, and to as much as possible. And so I think we do a good job.
That's a good job.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Alan Hollinger?
Yes, I think that the district does a good job at the quality of food that they provide for the students, the backpack program, the after-school programs. I think maybe they could improve a little bit with the evening meals in case there's parents that work at night and the children don't have an opportunity. So there is some room for improvement, but overall that they're doing a good job.
And Kelly Jones?
I grew up in a small town in Yankton, South Dakota, where I came from a low-income family, and we were eligible for free and reduced lunch. I got a little green ticket that I handed out to the cafeteria workers, and I got a particular kind of lunch, and I was told to eat everything that was on the plate because I was being gifted this food. So I'm very sensitive to food security and how we deliver nutrition to children in an equitable way. So certainly I think one area where the school district has had some could be doing maybe different practices or related to breakfast. So I would like to see the opportunity for in-class or morning snack breakfast offerings to students to ensure that they are having enough nutrition to start their day. We know that it has impact on how they perform educationally. So certainly I want to see an opportunity for students to not have to spend so much time trying to concentrate because they're hungry.
And finally, Gretchen Lister.
Yeah, I agree with what everyone has said. I was a certified employee with the district, and my children qualified for free and reduced. And it was important that they got that. Mom would certainly hear if, you know, I hadn't paid my monthly, so that they wouldn't have to be reminded in line that, oh, you know, you owe. There's got to be a way to relieve or reduce the stigmatization that goes with that. I think breakfast is absolutely critical. I wish kids had more time in the morning. They're rushed, parents are rushed, kids end up going to class, stomach's upset. We've got to find a way that kids can grab what they need to have the nutrition they need to be able to think and perform the way they need. So we've got to work on this some more. I'm for 3 recesses a day at elementary school, an hour for lunch, an hour for breakfast. Start earlier, take your time, enjoy it, socialize, and then get on with the day after you've organized. But we've got to find a way to slow it down a little bit for kids and keep investing in good nutrition, helping kids understand that, and let's remove the stigmatization that goes with it. Thank you.
Okay, and Alan Hollinger will begin the answers with the next question. And that is, our district clusters English as a second language, ELL, students at schools with teachers who have ELL certifications, rather than have ELL students attend their home school. Do you view this practice as having an overall benefit for these students? Do you view this as segregation?
Yeah, I do believe that they should, the teachers that are certified in that, if they can train new teachers or teachers that are at other schools, so that way the students don't have to be bused across town and lose valuable education time, I do feel each school should have at least one teacher on staff that can teach that, so they don't have to leave their home school.
Okay, and Kelly?
So my children attended Cordley Elementary School, which is an English language learner magnet school. And for me, the opportunity to be in school and for my kids to be in a school where there were 30 different languages was exciting. But I also think it benefited the children in terms of being able to see other students who are also English language learners reflected in their classroom. They did not and would probably not see that if they remained within their neighborhood schools, because we begin to see in Lawrence, where we don't have a critical mass of students that are English language learners, you may be in a classroom where you are the only English language learner. The other thing that happens when you concentrate resources is that not only all teachers, but all staff, teacher, parent facilitators are also educated on what are the specific needs for English language learners. It is a model that does have an unintended consequence in that children are not able to remain in their neighborhood, but parents have the opportunity to say that for my child, I would prefer that they stay within their neighborhood to have access to their friends that live nearby. It was hard for us to coordinate play dates, so I appreciate that, but I think overall the benefit for kids in terms of concentrating resources was valuable.
Gretchen Lister.
Sure. I think since we're aware that resources are an issue, I think whenever the child can get that English language, they should get it. I will tell you, when I worked at Cordley a number of years ago, it was a mother who was really struggling because the district wasn't offering to provide transportation at that time, and that mom lived on one side of the town and child was expected to go to another part of town. So I think if that's something the district's going to support, and we can't have those EL teachers in all our schools, we absolutely need to step up and provide the transportation to and from, so that we can take some of that burden off the families.
And our next candidate would be Mr. Gordon Ross.
One, I will personally say I kind of take issue with the word segregation in the question. I think that's a volatile word, and I don't agree with that. I think that's too strong of a word. I think it's consolidating resources because of the situation that we're in, that we have no other option. We don't have resources to provide ELL teachers at all the schools due to the financial situation that we're in. And so the benefits that Kelly spoke of consolidating the resources and having a critical mass to learn from each other and to see that they're not alone and that they can feed off each other is very valuable. But the downside are also very real. So if we find ourselves in a position of resources where we can change that, it certainly would be something to look at.
All right, that completes all of the candidates on that particular question, and we'll begin our next question with Kelly. And the question is, what are the district's greatest capital needs right now? How do you think those needs need to be addressed?
So the greatest capital needs we have right now in terms of capital outlay dollars likely lie within our high schools, particularly Lawrence High School, and we're seeing that addressed through the bond that we just passed in 2017. So for that particular issue, that's one that I got out and canvassed door to door for, and was excited to see that we have the opportunity to provide a more equitable high school for our LHS students as it relates to the facility that's newer at Free State. So certainly I think that's an area where we need to see more investment. If I'm understanding the question correctly, I'm assuming that's where the individual is speaking. If they're talking just generally about capital dollars, there are many areas that I believe the district can look at improvements. But with the combination with the 2013 bond and now the 2017 bond, I think we're in the right direction for capital improvements.
All right, then moving on then to Gretchen Lister.
Yeah, you know, this is one I kind of struggled with. I, again, have said repeatedly that it's important that we be equitable, but I don't think necessarily newer makes for better. I personally would rather have invested the money in more teachers, smaller classrooms, more equipment, more technology. We need another alternative high school. I want to be able to broaden opportunities for children to learn. Not every kid learns well in a class with 30 kids and one teacher. So the money spent, we're going to go in and we're going to, put a facelift on LHS, which was my old alma mater. Is that going to take care of all the issues that are there? I don't think so. It's a start. The community is investing in our kids and their futures and our buildings, and that's important that we continue to build on that infrastructure. But once built, we have to continue to maintain them, but we also have to fill them with the best teachers, the best technology, so we can have the greatest outcomes. Thank you.
Back to the beginning of the group, G.R. Gordon Ross.
I think the greatest capital outlay issue that the district has currently is LHS. As an LHS parent, I have 3 kids there right now, and I see it on a daily basis. And so the bond issue certainly addressed that, and I was excited for that bond issue. I also went out and canvassed it, supported it wholeheartedly, and so I'm excited to see the outcome of that and see the facelift of that, to also see the dollars that go to Free State, to see some of the improvements that they make there, and then the improvements that go to the 4 middle schools as well. I've been thoroughly impressed with what has happened to the elementary schools with the 2013 bond, and I'm hoping and excited for the same outcome with the 2017 bond.
And Alan Hollinger.
I agree with the previous comments about the school needing to be updated. You can't send your kids to facilities that aren't heated right or cooled right, or the kids are crowded in classrooms. So updating the schools, yes, needed to be done. After that, then we need to take care of the teachers and the paras and increase the wages for them so that the educators match the quality of the buildings or surpass the quality of the buildings, and so the children get the best education all the way around.
All right. Our next question then, we'll move to Gretchen Lister for the first answer, and that question is, please describe the level of ADA compliance met by our district facilities and staff, and explain if and how you would like to see that level of compliance increase.
You're talking about Americans with Disabilities Act. We have a pretty significant special education program in this district, but I think we can do a better job at really promoting it and really putting literature out with regard to it, so that families, students are aware of all the services that we're offering, so that there is no disparity. Certainly there are areas that we can improve upon. There's no question about it. I was a transition specialist in special education for 5 years, where we are looking at building independent living skills and work skills for young people. There is always room for improvement. I know the district works hard to bring in the best people, provide the most outstanding services they can. But it's important to look at what's going on in the high schools with kids with some pretty significant needs, and how they're being educated and in what way. I think we need to bring more functional opportunities into the classrooms, a little less academic for these kids who really do need to learn life skills. So I think the desire is there, the need is certainly there, and I know that the district is open to doing whatever is in the best interest.
Thank you, Gretchen, and G.R. Gordon Ross next to answer that question.
I personally can't speak to the level of compliance to what the district is to ADA regulations. I would hope that we are 100% compliant, but I honestly don't know because it's not something that I've looked at. I would certainly, if we're not, I would certainly be in support of getting there and going above and beyond what those regulations are, to provide for the individual needs of students as we discover what those needs are. Because we're only as successful as our least successful student, and so to being able to provide those needs and what that student needs and how we can provide an infrastructure to make sure that every student is successful, I think is an important goal for us to set.
And now to Alan Hollinger.
Yeah, as for compliance, I do not know. I have not been to all the buildings in the district. Again, I would echo what Gordon had to say. I would hope that if we aren't, that we would certainly get there in the quickest possible time that we could, and go above the federal government guidelines and make it more accommodating for all the students with disabilities. I also think, like Gretchen had said, if education is a struggle for some of these kids and they needed to be taught life skills, that should be put ahead before the education, so that way when they do graduate or move on, that they can function in society as competent adults.
All right, and Kelly Jones.
So recently, my daughter was hit by a car, and we had a moment where she was in a wheelchair. She's doing much better now, and we are very lucky. But we saw what it was like to navigate Central Middle School in a wheelchair. And even though it was ADA compliant, we found over and over and over again that there were areas where she just really couldn't fully participate within the classroom experience. So I'm sensitive to this issue, and I do think that we could certainly look at an overview of how, even in the buildings that are ADA compliant, which we saw an upgrade at the 2013 bond issue, that elementary schools, particularly our older buildings like Pinckney and Cordley, became more ADA compliant. But even within those contexts, there's still opportunity to make improvements. Right now at the federal level, we are seeing that there is a loosening of regulations as it relates to individuals who have disability, and it's becoming less clear or will become less clear for districts on how they are compliant. For me, this is an issue that I will certainly be following. I hope to provide support to families that have disabilities.
Folks, we've come to just about the halfway point of our discussion here today, and your opportunity to answer the questions. Even if I did mispronounce a word here earlier, you've done a fabulous job for an hour. And I suggested, the gentleman that took care of the session yesterday had suggested that maybe a 3-minute intermission might be something that was in order, so that everybody could kind of say thank you very much to each other, whatever, and then move on to the second half of our questions. I've completed the first page of our questions and have another full page of questions to go, and another hour listed as our timetable to go through the forum today. So we'll take about a 3 or 4 minute break right now and come back and finish up our questions of our school board candidates. Thank you. Thank you. All right.
It was a
Are we ready to go then? GR, we'll start with you as we
Okay.
did at the beginning, so we'll get started once again. Welcome back to our School Board Candidates Forum, sponsored by the Voter Education Coalition and KLWN. The upcoming general election on November the 7th. And we'll continue our questioning with our four candidates here. One of the candidates who will be on the ballot is unable to be here today because of her son recovering from surgery in Kansas City today. Melissa Johnson is not present. And with that, we'll continue our questions. And GR Gordon Ross, we started the first hour with you. We'll start the second as well. What does sustainability mean to you, and do you consider it a priority for the district from a construction, operation, HR, and curriculum perspective?
Sustainability means that, in a general sense, that a process or procedure is something that can be put into place and then it can maintain itself. It doesn't have to be babysat. It doesn't have to be institutional knowledge can be maintained from one person to another. So it's simple enough or straightforward enough, or however you want to say it, that it can sustain itself. And so for those three areas, HR, curriculum, and I forget what the third one was, I think any department or process should work to be sustainable in that, because you'll always have turnover. You'll always have people who turn over. And you want a process or procedure that's simple enough to understand, that it doesn't get disrupted or you have to start over anytime you hire someone new. And so from that definition and perspective of sustainability, I would say yes.
All right, and Alan Hollinger.
Yeah, I agree that sustainability should be somewhat of a priority, that each individual building should be sustainable, like their gardens that they have at the middle schools. Some of the elementary schools teach about sustainable living, growing your own foods, things like that, touching on curriculum. HR, again, you want a procedure in place to where if someone leaves, someone else can step right into that, and it doesn't take tons of time and money to retrain. As with the curriculum, you want a curriculum in place, a steady curriculum in place, instead of one changing year after year. And I don't remember the third one either, but.
It was construction.
Construction, yes. The building should be built to where they can sustain solar, wind, geothermal, some sort of sustainability to where they don't have to cost so much money to run.
All right, and Kelly Jones.
So sustainability as it relates to the environment is certainly, it's something that's important to my family. I'm married to a scientist, and I thought I'd get an opportunity to share that little piece of information. He is always looking at, are we acting in a way that is morally and ethically correct as it relates to our environment? So certainly I think looking at construction, looking at curriculum implementation, we're now at a moment in our world where we cannot ignore the importance of talking about sustainability. Marcel Harmon, who is stepping down from the board, has been a leader in this particular area, but I do think will be available and an asset in terms of consultation, and there are leaders in the Lawrence community that we can partner with and have conversation with on how do we continue to grow this area. Curriculum, I just want to say I am very supportive of teacher-driven curriculum innovation, so certainly any changes as it relates to curriculum, I would always want to hear input from the teachers.
Thank you. And now Gretchen Lister.
Yeah, you know, when I hear sustainability, I can sure appreciate the environmental aspects of it, but I also hear the moral and ethical, and I think we have to look at what's going on with curriculum in our schools, what's happening in our schools with issues of equity, equality, and diversity. I think we have to acknowledge that the achievement gaps are significant. We have to look at the way our kids are being treated, and I want to know, what is it we're trying to sustain? I think we need to answer that first. We can talk about curriculum, and is it being effective, and is it reaching all kids? If not, why not? And how can we change it up? The same with HR. I'm not pleased with our HR department. It's run by an attorney. It knows very little about human relations and mediation and how to take care of people. It knows how to protect its administrators from lawsuits. I want this district to be run by people who are student-driven, not fearful of litigation and lawsuits. So I think we have to look at what's going on in HR. We have to look at what's happening in curriculum. And yes, as far as our buildings go, are they safe? Are they sound? Are they sustainable? Thank you.
Thank you. All right, that was the list of the candidates on that particular question, and we'll move to the next one. This will begin with Alan Hollinger. Various topics of science research, various topics of science research are often politicized. With regards to curriculum and district policy, will you commit to using an evidence-based approach? Again, with regard to curriculum and district policy, will you commit to using an evidence-based approach?
As long as both sides are equally represented.
All right. And then on to Kelly Jones.
So it was like a lead-in, my last question. So I'm married to this scientist. He's a chemist. Certainly, I think the question is getting at whether or not, if I'm reading the underlying question, it's whether or not we will be acting in a way that supports good science curriculum and whether or not we will be teaching evolution is my understanding of this particular question, is the undertone there. So certainly, I think it's important that we are teaching science curriculum that is based in fact. The other thing that I would really want to point to is that with science curriculum, again, just looking at are we leaning on science teachers to make sure that they're supported in their curriculum implementation. One of the conversations I've had with science teachers specifically in the district is that right now our middle school and elementary school science curriculum is not as strong as they would like it to be, or that's at least a theme that I'm seeing emerge. And certainly we are huge advocates in my home of STEM education and particularly of science education. And I'll be looking at how can we provide teachers the support they need to provide quality science education.
All right. And did we begin there then? GR, would you like a shot at that one then?
I'll be happy to answer
Oh, I'm
that.
sorry, Gretchen, excuse me.
No worries.
I was looking ahead. Pardon me.
Yes, when it comes to science, I think it must be evidence-based as it is. I would also say, along with that, factual. Evolution, church and state, we keep them separate for a reason. So I think it is important to look at that and be aware of that concern as well. We need to promote more sciences in our classroom and make sure that they have the resources and the technology and whatever they need. Everything, again, that is fact-based and really driven by evidence. I would agree we need to look at that.
All right, and now GR.
I'd say yes. Teaching of science in a classroom should be evidence-based.
Okay, thank you. Now with the next question, and we'll start with Kelly Jones. Disrupting the school-to-prison pipeline is a major concept within restorative justice. Are you willing to research this process as a school board member?
Yeah, so not only am I willing to research it, it's something that I actively have practiced within the scope of my job. The reason why I think there's a conversation in Lawrence about restorative justice right now is we're looking at the overrepresentation of, or the disproportionate representation of students of color within our in-school and out-of-school suspension. It is one of those issues that brought me to the table, and it's certainly something where I think we can make great improvements. The other area where we see disproportionate representation of students getting consequences are individuals who have mental health concerns, so that they are also overrepresented. So when we move to a restorative justice model, what we're actually offering students is an opportunity to provide, have a safe space where they can have conversations with their peers around what the peer might have perceived as a slight, or what behavior is happening within the classroom. Do we have opportunity to bring in educators and social service staff that can provide an intervention as opposed to a consequence or a disciplinary action. So our goal as educators is to provide an opportunity to educate. When we know we have a practice that is racist, this is an opportunity for us to move forward and to push model programming within Kansas.
All right. And Gretchen Lister.
Hi, I know we have racism in our schools. We know it's something that we have been trying to deal with since we started our diversity program. We've kind of got to go back to the drawing board there because that program has not been as inclusive as I believe it should be. And at the same time, we're really going to have to take this one on. You can call it restorative justice, or you can just call it being equal and being equitable, being fair to all of our kids, treating all of our kids the same. It's a topic that isn't going to go away. We're now looking at transgender and LGBTQ, and we haven't even been able to wrestle with and bring some sort of resolution to the issue of race in our school district. We've got to be able to start at the top by bringing in a leader who's going to address this, run with this, be willing to have discussions that are painful and difficult, and also to begin to work with these students, and that's why I'm running, to try to break down some of that achievement gap and get some of these kids on the path to success. I'm really driven to do that. Thank you.
And moving to Mr. Gordon Ross.
Would you repeat the question for me, Hank?
Yes, disrupting the school to prison pipeline is a major concept within restorative justice. Are you willing to research this process as a school board member?
Yes.
Okay. And Alan Hollinger.
Yes, I'd be willing to research it, be on a committee to investigate it and implement changes. I'm on the Equity Council right now, and some of these issues we're looking at anyway on the council: in school, out of school suspension, disproportionate with children of color. So all this is very important, and yes, I would be willing to work with that.
Okay, and we'll begin the next line of question, the next question with Gretchen Lister, and that is, will you recognize a paraeducator bargaining unit if their association membership exceeds 50%?
Absolutely. I'm all for it. It's time that Paris stood up and had recognition beyond you're doing a great job. Let's give them a living wage. They're going to be unionized. I believe that. It's time. I was a para myself. I know many of them work 2 or 3 jobs. They're good at what they do. They love what they do. They support our teachers day in and day out. We couldn't really function without them anymore. So getting to the bargaining table, having those rights, you bet. And absolutely, more importantly, let's give these folks a living wage. We need them. We can't function without them. So, yes.
Our next candidate, G.R. Gordon Ross.
Yes, I would be in support of that.
And Alan Hollinger.
Yes, I would be too, not only for pay, but for training. A lot of the paras work with special education curriculums, so yes, I would be in favor for that.
And Kelly Jones.
Yeah, so my father was the president of his union growing up, and my best friend is the president of our teacher union. I have seen the benefit of unions, both personally and then also professionally. I think when we allow paras to unionize, when they are able to advocate on their behalf, we actually provide an opportunity where we have a higher quality of candidate, because the union will do things like protect wages, which we've mentioned, but also provide opportunity to advocate for better resources as it relates to how they deliver services to students, and particularly professional development. So I absolutely agree that unionizing for paras is an important and beneficial opportunity for this district.
All right, thank you. And now our next question will begin with G.R. Gordon Ross. What question would you ask a candidate for superintendent? What would you hope to learn from their response?
I would ask a candidate for superintendent, what have you done in your previous jobs to deal with equity issues? And what I would hope to learn from that is not just what they say, but to give me a foundation to go and see what they've done. The big thing that I've said in the superintendent search is I don't want a superintendent who just have said that they've done things, but I want to be able to validate that they've actually done things to address equity issues, that they have a track record of actually having made decisions, made policy, and made actual changes.
All right, and moving on to Mr. Hollinger.
Well, that was what I was going to say, but I will come up with a different question. I think besides the equity issue, I would hope that this wouldn't be their first time in that boat, that they've had some experience in it. But the other question I would probably ask is if they've had teaching experience. I would prefer a superintendent to have come from the teaching field rather than the professional field, so they can relate with their employees.
All right, and Kelly Jones.
So the superintendent sets the direction and tone of the district, and the questions that we ask them in the hiring process are incredibly important. And one of the ways that we've made sure that we are asking valuable questions is we've asked for community input, we've asked for educator input to determine what are our priorities in a candidate. Certainly, I would be asking questions about equity, and I think that experience-based questions where you can see an individual that can document that they have had practice and commitment and positive outcomes for that area are important. I'm interested in looking at what is an individual's leadership style. Are they flexible and collaborative in their leadership approach? Certainly, I want to work with a superintendent who prioritizes bargaining rights and due process rights for our educators. When you are supporting teachers and acting in their best behalf, I think you are supporting our students as well. And certainly looking at, can they provide evidence of the ability to interweave the district's mission with all aspects of resource allocation. So would I ask the superintendent one question? It would be about their experience.
All right, and Gretchen Lister.
Yeah, this is such an important one, and it's really exciting right now because we're in need of a significant amount of change in our district, I believe. And I really want to hear a story from this superintendent. I want them to tell me, if they can, to even kind of define what education means to them. What are students' obligations to their own education? What are teachers' responsibilities and obligations to teaching our students? How do we bring this community and this school district together? How can teachers not be fearful and feel comfortable to ask questions and make mistakes? Who do people go to? And we have to have a leader we can go to when things aren't going as we would like them to. Someone who can reassure and yet at the same time build confidence, and who really, they don't have to have taught. We're all teachers in our own way. I want them to have enough rich life experience to be creative, to be outgoing, to care about people, particularly young people, and to want to get involved, get out from behind their desk, get out and go to schools, interact with kids, interact with families, never stop asking questions, and want to attempt to do the best they can every day. Those are the kind of questions I want to ask. How are they going to do that?
All right, our next question will be started today by Alan, and that is, how should teacher performance be measured? Alan Hollinger.
I'm not familiar with how they do it now, so I guess I would rather pass on that question because I don't know, haven't done enough research to know how they do it and what steps they could do to make it better. So.
All right, and Kelly Jones would be next.
So one of the conversations I've had with teachers is how they are being evaluated within the classroom setting, and I've heard that there's recently been some changes to how they're evaluated. What I would like to see for teachers so that they have a comprehensive evaluation that's meaningful is that they have opportunity to provide data that goes outside of just what the test scores are for their particular students, that they have opportunity to be fairly and objectively observed by the principals. So one of the things I think that could happen that we used to do but are no longer doing is providing principals mentorship on how they evaluate teachers, and to provide them mentorship that is on a day-to-day basis. So there was a program with a previous superintendent where principals were getting the support they needed to provide adequate evaluations, and in part that came out of being able to bounce off of another administrator how they were doing it. So I definitely would like to see a return to that mentorship possibility for principals, and teachers having the opportunity to be evaluated on their performance, not just test scores.
And Gretchen Lister.
Yeah, I would agree with Kelly, much more on performance. I want to see evidence-based. I really have to tell you, I love the idea of students being able to evaluate their teachers. Paras being able to evaluate the teacher, teachers being able to evaluate their administrators. I think feedback is how we learn. I think any opportunity, I like the idea of mentoring. I think we need to begin to develop this culture where we can be open and we can be honest and we can do better. And I say evidence-based because there are some teachers that do things incredibly well. And a lot of what I've seen personally in being in the school district is that very often it's an administrator or supervisor who comes in and observes for 15 minutes in the course of a quarter or a semester to make a determination to evaluate, and then talk to second and third parties getting information. Let's talk to the real parties. Let's talk to the kids up front and center. How's your teacher doing? What could they do better? How can we help that teacher do better? So same with paras who are in these classrooms. Tell us about your teacher. What do you like? What do you don't like? You know, and the same with teachers. Tell us about your administrators, because I'll tell you what, if you'll listen long enough, you'll be amazed. But the teachers can't be afraid to speak up. We have to honor our teachers. Thank you.
Okay, and the last candidate on that question is G.R. Gordon Ross.
I think the most appropriate way to evaluate a teacher would be a mix of a lot of different things. I think it shouldn't come down to just one thing. It shouldn't come down to just test scores. It shouldn't come down to just evaluations from a principal. It shouldn't come down to just one thing. It should be a bucket of things. I look at my own job, and for my yearly evaluation, I do a self-evaluation. My boss does an evaluation, and then there are two people on my team that are randomly assigned to do a peer evaluation. And so it's 4 different inputs that all come together to make an evaluation. And so I think some system that takes that into account, whether they're helping students grow and learn and get better. And so ultimately, I think a system that can evaluate their progress and their ability from multiple different angles and aspects would be the ideal situation.
All right, and we'll move on to our next question now, and that will begin with Kelly Jones. Describe your view on the roles of the school board and the superintendent. What is the ideal relationship between the two?
So the ideal relationship between the superintendent and the school board would be one that is collaborative, where there's an understanding of what the goals are that were set, and that everyone is working in the direction of achieving those goals. So there's a goal-setting process that happens, and the board is responsible for asking informed questions on how we are making progress toward those goals. The superintendent is in charge of informing the board how that is progressing. In terms of the role of the board versus the role of the superintendent, certainly there's opportunity for the superintendent to do leadership roles within the district that are not the purview of the board. We are to be citizen reviewers, to ask questions that are important to the families and to the students that we serve, and to be advocating for the best learning environments and teaching environments for our teachers. So when we are doing that collectively, I think everyone wins.
And moving to Gretchen Lister.
Yeah, I really want a superintendent that I can spar with. I want a superintendent that I can ask tough questions, and I really believe in that parents have certainly brought them to me. I want to know why things aren't going a certain way. How can we make them better? Not just, don't bring me the problems, bring me the solutions. But I want someone who's going to be willing to listen and to laugh, but to hear what the board has to say, because we really are representing the families and the students in the district and want to make sure that we're serving them properly. So I'm wanting to make sure I can ask tough questions, and that there's not going to be anything behind closed doors, discussions with superintendents before we go out and see the rest of the community. I want things to be as open and as fair as possible, and that this be a person who understands that in order to build, we have to start from within. So I'm really looking forward to the opportunity and the challenge. Thank you.
Next candidate to answer, Mr. Gordon Ross.
I think in terms of roles, I think the school board has mainly three main roles. One is to hire a superintendent. Two is to set the goals and the direction of the board, and three is to approve the budget in which to do those things. And then the superintendent's main job is to operate within that budget and to move the district along those goals and toward those goals. And then on a yearly basis, the board then evaluates how the district, the school board evaluates how the superintendent has executed those functions. In terms of a collaborative, in terms of a working relationship, I agree with what Kelly said. I would envision a collaborative working relationship where we work together to do those goals, where we can ask tough questions. We have a relationship where we can ask and we can expect answers, but that those questions and answers, as Gretchen said, are done in the open. They're done as we represent the community who elected us to serve.
All right, and Mr. Hollinger.
I feel that the board and the superintendent, yes, should work together, come up with the goals to move the district forward and enforce those, not enforce those, but make sure those goals are met. But I also realize that the public elects the board members, and the board members are the bosses. The superintendent should remember that it answers to the board, not the board answering to the superintendent. Again, though, I do feel that they should work together for the betterment of the students in the district.
All right, and Kelly Jones.
I think I answered it.
You got the first one on that one. Excuse
I'm
me,
glad
I'll
to
have
answer it
come
again,
all the way
but-
back around again and pick that up. I thought I had these all in order. They're adding questions, and I'm going to get them right here, by golly. This would start with Gretchen then. Gretchen Lister, would you support funding WRAP, W-R-A-P, a mental health program for children run by Bert Nash? Would you support funding for WRAP?
You know, I am a social worker, and I'm a mental health social worker. I have to tell you honestly that I think when we've got disturbances in school with kids, we do need to have folks on hand to kind of help calm them and work with them. I think workers like WRAP belong at the beginning of the day or the end of the day. I don't think kids should be excused from a classroom because they're having difficulty to spend the better part of an hour and lose that lesson and go to the social worker's office. And I've seen it time and again. We've got to find a way to utilize these services and really refer people, as I said, either before or after school, or WRAP worker, go have lunch with a student. I'm always for investing in kids in terms of making them feel emotionally sound. WRAP workers take a really holistic view. I'd like to see more nurses in our schools. I'd like to see social workers with nurses in our schools. I'd like to see more transition specialists in our schools. There are other things I would rather see than WRAP workers. If we know we have a child who has this much difficulty, we need to figure out what's going on in the classroom and how we can serve them in the community and what resources we can hook them up to. So no, I don't think we need more WRAP workers in the school district.
Okay.
Thank you.
G.R. Gordon Ross.
Yeah, I would support that. I think the WRAP program has done a lot of good for the community, and I think sometimes that's what a student needs. Unfortunately, with the budget situation that we have been, it just hasn't been an option. I think we have an opportunity going forward if things play out the way they are. We may have the financial means to do that, and I think it can provide a lot of good in certain situations for schools to have those resources. Because sometimes that's just what a student needs, and so yes, I'd be supportive of that.
Alan Hollinger.
Yes, I would be supportive of a WRAP worker.
Okay, and Kelly Jones.
So I think the question was related to funding as it relates to RAP. So the funding for RAP is a program that is connected to the Burton Ash. And we did see recently the city provide some funding to RAP to sustain it at a higher level. Much of the social services that happen within the school district, the funding comes through IEPs, and meaning that they are funded through Medicaid dollars. So one of the things I've been working on and watching closely is what's happening at the state level and at the national level as it relates to Medicaid funding. I don't think that people often know that there is a connection to that particular issue. In terms of how we structure social services within the school district, I do think that RAP plays a critical role because social services and social workers within the district are so tied to IEPs, which is a different source of funding. RAP workers are able to outreach to students that are not necessarily underneath the umbrella of special education. I would like to see us utilize counselors within the school district and the way that we utilize RAP workers as well. So I think there are opportunities to improve how we deliver social services, and I absolutely support RAP.
Okay, now we'll go to our next question, and our first candidate to answer this question will be G.R. Gordon Ross. What civic, business, or advocate groups do you have connections with? What about their agenda appeals to you? What is a specific issue in which you disagree with them? I would be happy to answer that or ask that question again as you, it's got several different parts to it. What civic, business, or advocate groups do you have connections with? What about their agenda appeals to you? And what is a specific issue that you might disagree with them?
I do a lot of work and am a volunteer with the Boy Scouts. I do it through my church, and I have two sons, both of which have been involved in Boy Scouts. So what appeals to me to the Boy Scouts are their core missions, which I should know off the top of my head. Both of my sons could probably rattle them off the top of their head. I cannot. But to empower youth to be better citizens really is what it is. And watching my sons go through that program, I think that it has been inspiring as they have learned how to do different things and learn different skills and to become better men. I think it has been something that I have been proud of to be associated with the Boy Scouts. I think something that I have been disagreed with, so I will clarify on the record that I am in favor of including girls in the Boy Scouts, which was the recent announcement. I think what I would disagree with is probably how they went about it. I think they, I don't think they did it in a very good way. I think they could have included the Girl Scouts more in that decision, and I think they could have been more inclusive in the process.
All right, and moving on to Alan Hollinger, your civic group.
Well, I'm not involved with a civic group or business, but I am on the Equity Advisory Council in the school district. I enjoy going to the meetings. I enjoy doing everything we can for the betterment of all students, especially the marginalized or children of color. I enjoy the discussions we've been having, most recently the name change of South. Anything so far that we've discussed, I have not had any issues with. Most of the discussion, or all of the discussion's been good discussion in moving the district forward for the children.
All right, and Kelly Jones.
So in my role at the university, I partner with approximately 250 social service agencies in the area, and sometimes more than that. I have relationships with most of the nonprofit agencies within Lawrence. Some of them are peripheral, and some of them are much more close and dear to my heart. I will say that recently, as a school board member, we were invited to participate in a forum with Kansas Appleseed. This is an agency that I think does incredible work. And when you talk about disrupting the prison to the pipeline for school children from prison to
School to prison.
Yes, thank you for your help. That I'm really, I think they do incredible work, but here's what I disagree with. They are advocates for the after-school program, meal program that's funded through the federal dollars, and that particular program, while on the surface looks great, I have trouble with how it is administered. Only students that are engaged in an after-school activity can get those meals. Those meals are limited in terms of age. You have to be under the age of 18. So there are some things about that particular policy that I think could be better, and that we could work with other agencies in Lawrence to make a stronger meal program for after schools.
All right, and I believe that we would then go to Gretchen.
Yeah, I don't have ties to any group. My children, I'm very obviously involved with the school district. I work with families and children in need of care right now, so my time is taken up, but I'm willing to make time and want to for the school board. So there are no ties outside of that.
Okay. Our next question, will begin on this one with Alan. How will you build a consensus and support in the community around the work of the school district? What do you bring to the table in that? How would you build consensus and support in the community?
Well, I would make sure that all decisions that the school board made are all, other than things that have to be done legally to protect names or identities in executive session, everything else should be done publicly. Make sure you get the students' input, the parents' input, community's input for that matter. You can change a start time at a school and disrupt a lot of people's lives without getting that information first. So I believe that as a school board member, you make sure that everything's done openly and honestly with as much input as possible. If that means pushing a meeting to the next meeting to get input, so be it.
All right, and moving to Kelly Jones.
So I think one of the components of that question is this question of transparency, which has come up for all of us as candidates, and I think has come up for the board that is currently seated. One of the suggestions has been that we open up town hall meetings where maybe we can get more community members to a board meeting and have opportunity to get input there. I think this particular board understands that this was an area where they needed improvement, and they have acted in a way where I believe will have better outcomes in terms of transparency and community engagement and involvement. As a school board member, one of the things that I certainly will be looking at as we hire a superintendent is, are we looking for a candidate who has strong community engagement skills? As a social worker, I have facilitated many town halls on my own. I have been engaged in community work for 20 plus years, and certainly it's a skill that I would bring to the board, and I think would build on the direction that the current board is trying to take in terms of transparency.
All right, and moving on to Gretchen Lister.
Yeah, you know, this one is near and dear to my heart. I think I said from the get-go that I have no difficulty in being upfront and honest and sharing. I think we need to have an open door policy. I feel very strongly that the current board has not always been well advised, including our former superintendent, and I think we have to really look at the legalities of those in HR that are providing some of that. And I think even if it means we need to step out of what they deem as being legally inappropriate and we can't speak to the public about, that we need to check that with someone other than the district legal team to make certain that that is in fact the case. So I feel real strongly about this. That's probably been the #1 issue in this district, that it has not been forthcoming and been willing to communicate needs and concerns. Parents are sometimes the last ones to hear that they have a situation with their child in school. There's no excuse for that when we have emails and opportunities to pick up a phone and talk to one another. So that's going to be one of the leading things I'm going to get behind and really push for, is that we all understand where we're coming from, what's going on, and make it as inclusive for this community as possible, and continue to have families involved in what's going on in their children's lives as it pertains to school. Thank you.
Mr. Gordon Ross.
I think finding any means necessary to communicate, that sounds really weird, but to find all avenues to communicate with the public, I think through making yourself available through email, through phone, through social media. I think City Commissioner Herbert has done a great job with his Facebook page of showing what an engaged candidate can do and how he can engage community members in dialogue outside of commission meetings so that their voices can be heard, I think would be something that I would strive to do. And so ultimately, you gain consensus by listening and taking all the input and then taking what you've heard back to the board and being that voice for the people that they elected you to be.
All right. And I believe that takes us through all the candidates on that question. So we'll begin the next question with Kelly Jones. And that question is, the district has focused heavily on equity. In what ways can the school board create more accountability to ensure those standards are adhered to?
So as it relates to equity and persisting in the district's efforts to increase the graduation rate and closing the achievement gap and creating more access for students from marginalized populations to participate in enrichment programming, one of the things the board can do is really ask for evidence that we are making progress in those directions. So we saw a presentation from members of the equity team at the district level around what they have been doing this year, what progress they have made. I think there were some questions that were not asked, specifically questions that the community has been asking. We've mentioned previously this conversation about in-school and out-of-school suspension. There's been several questions about restorative justice. We've been looking at, how do we make positive improvements and provide opportunity for teachers to have more education as it relates to identifying their own bias. So certainly I think the board has opportunity to engage in those questions around equity and inclusion at every board meeting. So not just at designated times in the semester where we get an update, but to ask with all questions in front of us, how does this relate to our equity and inclusion goals? How will it help us achieve what we're working on in that as it relates to that direction? Every time we work every time we make progress toward equity and inclusion, we are impacting every student. All students benefit from an equitable education.
Moving to candidate Gretchen Lister.
Yeah, thank you. All students do, but they're not. They're not in our Lawrence School District. We have kids, primarily black students in this district, who aren't graduating at the same rate as white students, and that's wrong. I personally want to get involved over the course of the next 4 years, whether I get an opportunity to serve on this board or not. I certainly want to be involved in working with transition specialists and counselors. Beyond just working with kids with disabilities, we have a huge at-risk population. We're losing kids who don't believe that they have any reason to be here, that they have anything to gain from education, and they do. We need to figure out, and I personally want to figure out how I can help those kids. I'm an incredible advocate, and I can help create some inroads and get to a point where, yes, you do have something to offer. Let's help you get there. Let's figure out what it's going to take to get you graduated and feeling successful and on your way to being a confident, competent individual in your community. This is one I really want to get behind and I take very, very seriously. Thank you.
All right, and G.R. Gordon Ross.
Could you repeat the question for me, Hank? Sorry.
All right, the district has focused heavily on equity. In what ways can the school board create more accountability to ensure those standards are adhered to?
One of the things that I found in talking to teachers across the district is, at different buildings, every building has an equity team. And one of the things that I found is that some of those teams are more effective than other teams. And so I think one thing that could be done is to maybe look at those teams that are effective as an example and to use those teams to help the teams that are less effective and maybe draw them all up under the purview of the Equity Council. I don't know if they already are. They function under the Equity Council that Alan sits on. But to put some standardization behind what those equity teams do, what their jobs are, to make it kind of a standard throughout the district at the different buildings so that they all have the same job and they all have the same requirements. So they're all focused on the same goals and moving in the right direction.
All right, and Alan Hollinger.
Read it one more time for me, please, Mr. Booth.
All right. The district has focused heavily on equity. In what ways can the school board create more accountability to ensure those standards are adhered to?
Well, definitely with the new superintendent, and I realize maybe the goals have already been set, but once the new superintendent's hired, make sure that, I don't know how many goals are set each year, but top 2 or 3 goals are equity driven. And then come up with a procedure to make things accountable, graduation rate, or lowering the suspension or in-school or out-of-school suspension rate. Just put procedures in place to make different peoples at different levels, district level, administrative level, all accountable. Make them realize that the students need to be first. If you see something wrong, you need to report it and get it taken care of.
All right, and I believe now we'll move on then to Gretchen Lister to begin our next question. What do you think are the primary challenges facing our school district? What do you think are some of our school district's greatest strengths?
Oh, that's a good question. I think I'll start with the strengths. We've got an incredibly gifted group of teachers, equally gifted paras. We've got committed families. We've got a good classified group of folks who show up and work in our cafeterias and do our landscaping and keep our buildings clean. It really does take a village to make sure our children have what they need. On the other hand, I know as a mom, and I know as a former employee of this district, that there are some kids whose needs aren't being met, and we've got to do better there. I've said this, and I'm just repeating myself, but it's not fair to have such large classrooms and that our teachers who really love teaching feel that they can't reach every child. We've got to figure out how we can bring our virtual program into the schools somewhat. We've got to really work on other paths beyond just, once you have your core down, let's look at what else is available for you to move forward to be a successful young adult. We have a lot of things to tackle in this district. The number one thing right now is to hire the best superintendent we can, because we have been at a loss without having adequate leadership for a while. So it's time to make sure and ensure that leadership is there. Thank you.
Next candidate, G.R. Gordon Ross.
I'll take the question in the same order that Gretchen did. I think the best thing that we have are the teachers and the staff and the resources that we have. I grew up in a small town in Missouri, and I thought my high school experience was awesome, and the things that I got to do, and then I see the things that my kids get to do at Lawrence High School, and I'm like, that's just not fair. Just all the experiences that they have, and the resources available, and the teachers that care about them, and all the way through, not just Lawrence High School. I'm going to have Prairie Park teachers that want to kill me, but the staff. I think the greatest challenge that we have to overcome in talking to teachers and staff is a lack of trust with the administration at the moment. That we can hire the best superintendent in the world who can come up with the best programs that will solve all of our problems, but if the rank and file staff don't trust them and aren't willing to listen to them because they fear to speak up or they fear repercussions, it doesn't matter. And so it's fixing that culture of non-trust with the administration.
All right, and Alan Hollinger.
I will just reiterate what everybody else has said so far, is the teachers, the paras, the staffing. That's the quality that the school has here. They do need to feel that they are wanted and appreciated here in the school district, from what I've heard. That's one thing that the district could work on. Also, a consistent curriculum. It changes too frequently so that the teachers and the students both are confused or lack. So more consistency in the curriculum and making sure that all the employees feel that they are wanted and needed in the district.
All right, and Kelly Jones.
I have 2 daughters that have benefited from excellent education in the Lawrence Public Schools. My husband and I reside in Lawrence. We could live in other areas, primarily because of the quality of public education that is offered to our children here. That's definitely speaks to the educators within the district. So as everyone else has said, I would certainly say that our teachers are our greatest asset along with our support staff. In terms of challenges right now, I think that the teachers and the support staff and certainly students during the current transition from we had a permanent superintendent, and then we had a superintendent we hired where it wasn't a good fit. We've had an interim, and now we're looking at another superintendent. So each time we have those transitions, the teachers are given different directions. There's new administration that they have to respond to. So providing teachers and students the support they need during this transition is one of the challenges that I think that the board can help contribute to. I also want to mention, in terms of strengths within Lawrence, we've been talking about the equity and inclusion issues. We can build on the strengths that Lawrence currently has. Just pointing out the LGBTQIA task force that was established last year, they've done really good work. I have more to say about our good work.
Thank you very much. And again, I want to begin our next to the last question, and we'll start it with Gordon, with GR, Gordon Ross. Do you believe that having an instructional unit on voter education guidelines and processes should be a regular part of the high school's curriculum in an effort to prepare our youth to be active participants in local, state, and national elections?
Yes, I think along with that, since I have 60 seconds, because that's a yes/no question, I would also include things like how to handle a checking account and what a 401k is and all sorts of life skills that my senior in high school who's going to go to college was yelling at me for, that I can do a geometry problem, but I don't know how to fill out a FAFSA. I think that that's a fantastic idea. I would support that wholeheartedly.
Alan Hollinger.
Yes, I would support that. I'm on board for that.
Okay, and Kelly Jones?
So I wish that Matthew Herbert were running for the school board, because I think he could speak to this more eloquently than we could in terms of how the district already is providing that education to students. I know that my daughter just finished a civics class where she did begin to learn about that process. We are seeing a very engaged student body. So recently we saw protests that made in Lawrence, that made national news, and we have students that are really aware of what is happening in terms of their rights. This is a critical time for our students where we can provide them the education as it relates to being good citizens. So the answer to the question is yes. And I think we are doing that in part, and I want to acknowledge the good work that teachers are already doing around this issue.
All right, and to wrap it up with that question, we have Gretchen Lister.
Yes, of course, that's important. I really like what GR said about kids need all kinds of life skills to feel successful. I want us to be sure in our mission statement, when we say we have kids that are college ready, what does that mean? How are they college ready? Because when they get to college, college says they're not ready. We have kids that are career ready. How are we doing that in this district, and what does that mean? What does education mean to kids in this school? Before I ask them to go out and vote for anything, I'm going to ask them to vote for themselves. It's great to have LGBTQ, transgender, black, white, you name it. I want kids to invest in their futures with regard to their education and what they're learning and what they care about. I want it to be more individualized by child. So I'm saying that all that peripheral stuff is great and it's really important, but we're here to educate. We're here to give our kids a foundation. Let's be clear about what that is. Let's be clear as to what our expectations are, even if we have to keep reminding families and kids why they're here and what our job is. So that's what I want to see first. The things that we're currently promoting now, are we being successful at those before we start adding more? Thank you.
All right, now our last question, and this one will wrap it up for our questions for our candidates for this school board forum. I want to thank the person that's been taking care of the occasional little ding you've heard from time to time when candidates have exceeded their 1 minute, and thank Julie Hack for sitting in, a former member of the school board, I might add, a few years ago, and thank her for that service and her service here with the Voter Education Coalition as well. The last question, why are you running for the school board? And what do you hope to accomplish during your service? And Alan Hollinger, you'll start that process out at beginning the final question.
Well, to keep a long story short, it started with my youngest son when he was a senior at LHS. He came home and made a couple comments, and that got me asking questions and further asking more questions and going to board meetings, and so that's what got me going, was my youngest son. What do I hope to accomplish? That everybody that goes to any school in our district gets the quality education that they deserve. Doesn't matter what color you are, doesn't matter what gender you are, you're there for your education and to better yourself when you leave whatever high school you graduate from, and can become a successful individual further on in your life.
All right. And moving on to Kelly Jones.
So I am a first-generation college graduate. I had all the bumps that go along with that, but made my way through college and have seen the benefit personally of a good public education. My quality of life is much higher than my mother's at my age, and I'm grateful for that education. As a social service worker for the last 20 plus years, I've worked with people on all manners of issue. I like to tell people, and I think I have at every forum we've had, my youngest client was a newborn and my oldest was 106. And in every instance, if an individual was experiencing a crisis, they weathered that crisis better if they had access to a good, strong public education. So for me, this opportunity to serve on the school board is an opportunity to provide solutions to problems that I have worked my entire life to make a dent in. I know that this is a good place to use my time. What I hope to accomplish while I'm here is certainly to persist in the district's efforts to close the access and achievement gaps. I want to support teachers and staff and superintendents and the superintendent during the transition, and I'm committed to engaging the community in all issues related to public education.
Thank you. And Gretchen Lister.
Hi, thank you very much. Yeah, you know, for me, it's really kind of a passionate thing. I was involved with the district for 5 years at my last tenure, and found myself really struggling with administrators and facilitators and teachers, people I didn't think I should be struggling with on behalf of children. And I felt that we all couldn't see the same way, and I could appreciate that, but I felt it was absolutely imperative that we understood first and foremost what that parent and child's way was as well. And I think we sometimes got in our own way in trying to help people. And so I knew that if things were going to get better for certain families that I served in IEPs and as an advocate for, who didn't know how to speak for themselves, that I was going to have to run for this board and do my best to speak up for all kids. Regardless of their color, socioeconomic, gender, you name it. I'm shocked in this day and age. When I graduated in '73 from this district, we were struggling with the issues of race. And here we are today, and we're still struggling with those issues. And I'm dumbfounded and I'm shocked that our graduation rates are as dramatically low for kids of color as opposed to our white youngsters. So I want to really make a huge commitment to that group of young people and assure them that we can make a difference for them in that area, and I want to do that. Thank you.
And G.R. Gordon Ross.
I've had the privilege over the last several years to be involved in the district, not only as a parent. I have 5 kids in the district, 1 at Prairie Park, 1 at South, and 3 at LHS. But I've served on the Prairie Park Site Council, the South Site Council, served on the District Boundary Committee, served on the Elementary Efficiency Committee that met 6 or 7 years ago. And so this was just a natural step to continue that service of the district. I had the privilege when I was younger to watch my mom serve on a school board, to be the first woman elected to the school board in a small town that we grew up in, and set an example for me of service and the importance of public education. And so I've always had that as a goal of what it means to give back. And so that's why I'm here. What I hope to accomplish is to continue the equity work that the district has already started, to continue the foundation that this current board has set for transparency, and also to improve the use of technology within our district. You can do a lot with technology and spend very little, or you can do very little and spend a lot. And I hope to lean on the side of spend very little and do a lot.
Again, we do want to thank everyone for participating who's been here, and we also want to recognize as well that Candidate Melissa Johnson was unable to be here because she is with her son who's recovering from surgery at a Kansas City hospital. I want to remind our viewers and listeners that there are 2 names that will be on the ballot that are not running, that have taken their names out of contention. Any votes that are given to these 2 will be disregarded. They will not count. They're Steve Wallace and Jill Hayhurst. The candidates that you heard and saw here today are the candidates that are on the ballot. Along with that 5th candidate, there will be those 5 candidates to choose from. And we do want to thank all of our friends that participated in this, the Voter Education Coalition, and KLWN want to thank you for joining us for our forum. You can rewatch the forum anytime on the City of Lawrence YouTube channel, the Voter Education Coalition's website, and it will be rebroadcast on klwn.com over the next few days, and we will have it on KLWN at various times over the next few days as well, up to the election. A special thanks to the City of Lawrence and all of the candidates for joining us. Have a great evening.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank you very much. Thanks, everyone. It's a pleasure.
Well, I got them messed up once.